Welcome to The Sensitive Warrior, where feeling everything is your superpower. Hi, I'm Doreen Lang. I'm your host. I'm also author of Embracing Venus, Achieve a Life Lit Up for Highly Sensitive People. Here's my book cover for your viewing pleasure. I'm also a coach for highly sensitive people, and I also offer Reiki as a means to relax and prevent people from burnout, being a highly sensitive person. I do this in Norwell, Massachusetts, in my studio called Blossom Healing Studio, as well as virtually. I'm really excited about today's guest. I have been wanting to speak with a really smart person on the subject of narcissism, and I found Wendy Weinberg. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So happy you're here. Wendy is a psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just talk to her briefly about how she got started, and then we'll dive in. So how did you get started in this very intense career?
Well, I think my mother was always a big influence on me. She was a pediatric nurse. Then she went back to school and she became, she got her bachelor's in psychology, and she was a drug and alcohol counselor.
Wow.
And then she went back to school again and was a special ed teacher. And then she taught special ed, taught nursing to special ed students.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And just growing up with her, people would come up to us in the supermarket and say, "Your mom saved my life." And
wow.
Yeah. So she was like a huge influence on me.
Wow, that's hero.
Yeah, she is a hero.
That's wonderful.
She was, yeah.
Yeah, she was.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have you been doing this work?
About 30 years.
Wow, okay, so you're the perfect person to talk to about this. This is great.
Thanks.
So thank you so much. So before we dive in, I did print out this morning the definition of narcissism, and of course I left it on my desk. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of recall, and you can kind of help me.
Sure.
But I also want to talk a little bit about energy vampires, because there is a difference. So narcissists are people that crave admiration and attention. Okay, they have a grandiose idea of themselves. They lack empathy and often manipulate others for their own benefits. It can be intentional. They often make people feel small, unworthy, or even and they use them to elevate themselves. So these are really complicated people. And the challenge for highly sensitive people is being so kind and empathetic. We tend to see this person as potentially, would you say, vulnerable or weak, or they need attention. Mm-hmm. So they think, I can help them, maybe I can fix them, I'll spend time with them, and they'll see that they're really fine. When in fact you can't change a narcissist. It's really the narcissist that can only change themselves. Would you say that's on point?
I would say that's very much on point.
Okay, yeah. What would you add to that?
Well, I think, the only way anyone can change themselves is being honest with who they are, with what they see in the mirror, mm-hmm. and saying, okay, I want to improve. You have to like what you see in the mirror, but with a narcissist, they only see what they want to see.
Then they see somebody terrific.
They do. I mean, I do believe with narcissists that there is some insecurity, and but I think lying is easy for them in a lot of ways. It's just a part of who they are. And so I think they start to believe their own lies.
Yeah, and I do know people like that. They start to tell a story and they really embellish it, and they get upset that you don't believe them, and they go deeper and deeper, but it's just a story.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. And briefly, before we even go deeper as to the effects in people in relationships, is energy vampires. In my coaching, one of my main sessions is called dealing with energy vampires and narcissists. But energy vampires are different. They will drain your energy, and sometimes unknowingly. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of either they're down at the time and they're calling you up, always complaining about this or that, and they will drain your energy. But narcissists are someone, this is how they're wired. This is how their brain works. It's not situational or having a bad day. This is who they are.
Right.
Right.
Their show.
It's their show. I love that. Mm-hmm. So how would you describe narcissism with people that are also maybe social, sociopaths?
Yeah, I think it's a spectrum, narcissism. And I think, sociopaths are narcissists, but I think not all narcissists are sociopaths. So I think it's a spectrum, and people are, set along the way. They have different attributes. Right.
So, I mean, not to get so dark, and then the extreme, right, is a psycho narcissist, right? Somebody that only knows, it's in there, they're in their own world and they only cause harm. right? Right. So in my book, I did interview 3 therapists.
Okay.
This was a couple years ago, and I asked them all, about narcissism and narcissists, and all 3 of them said to me, all 3 of them said the same thing. They said, I will not work with them.
Right.
So tell me about that.
It's very tough, and a lot of times I think narcissists know how to fool people because they know how to suck you in with flattery and love bombing and stuff like that. And what I find with narcissists, and of course, as a therapist, you are going to work with them.
Yeah.
Not that anyone ever really wants to, but it happens. And a lot of anger comes out, and you get attacked, especially if they call it a narcissistic wound, where they feel like they're being, that you don't agree with them, you're not complimenting them in the way that they feel they need to be complimented. So
if you're not with them, you're against them, kind of
exactly.
thing? Yes.
And so you see a lot of anger issues and tempers.
You do. Mm-hmm. So now when you're in your practice, when you see people that have tendencies, you will work with them because they're tendencies, right? Or no, or if they're full spectrum, you won't. Like, how do you kind of navigate?
Well, it's hard because when people come in, they don't come in and say, I'm a narcissist.
Right.
And I have worked with them. I have not enjoyed working with them, but I think when I started my private practice, it was like one client, and if you build it, they will come, kind of thing. And then as you try and learn a specialty, or focus on something that you feel like. For me, I work with a lot of adult adoptees, as well as people who want to adopt and stuff like that, because I have 2 kids that are adopted.
Oh, wow.
But in that as well, sometimes there's like that rejection fear. So I have worked with people who have been adopted, who feel very abandoned, and they have a temper, and they feel entitled to a temper. And so,
and entitlement is a very big part of this.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really interesting. So that is your specialty.
Yes.
That must warm your heart.
It does, I think, because I can personally relate because I was on the journey, and it was the most wonderful thing I ever did.
Yeah.
And I love my kids.
Yeah.
But it's not an easy road navigating all of that.
No, I can't imagine. And all the emotional parts to it too, the support people need. So let me ask you, highly sensitive people clearly on the spectrum of empathy.
Right.
They're extremely empathetic. Right? So just a brief story is I did have a client, and she was dating a narcissist for a very long time. And she just saw him as difficult until she came to me and she says, I don't know what I'm doing right or wrong.
Right.
And she wanted to talk about the relationship. And I referred her, of course, to somebody like yourself, But she said, I am seeing a therapist, but I kind of need to talk through like almost like a friend who's going to say, that sounds crazy. Like I need to have like a sounding board even in addition to my therapist. I need even more because I don't know what to do. I'm looking for help everywhere. I said, okay, how can I help you?
Right.
She told me that the love bombing was incredible at first.
Right.
The flowers, the cards, the phone calls, the texts, the love making. It was just in the beginning, just like she thought, okay, you know what? This is what love is. This is what love is. This is all the hallmark, right? This is the way life is supposed to be. I had no idea I could love like this.
Right.
And it was wonderful. It was a couple of months. And they went to a restaurant, and she was he was drinking pretty heavy at the time. I don't know if that's a part of this. I don't know. Maybe it's for to reduce his own excitement, whatever. But he bought her a drink, and then she finished it during dinner. And then when she went to the latest drink, came back, there was another drink. And she really didn't want that other drink because wasn't much of a drinker.
Right.
So she asked wine. He says, oh, he was always trying to almost give her all these things to make her feel so special.
Right.
So she started drinking more than she would want because he wanted to stay longer and talk to the people next to him and talk to the woman across the bar. He was really an outgoing guy, and she thought, well, this is just a fun night out. She was starting to be reprogrammed after being alone for a long time. She's thinking, well, this is what it's like in the dating world. So they decided to go for a weekend away. And they were going to a Airbnb, and I think she said Rhode Island, and they live in the Hanover area. And so it was a bit of a ride.
Right.
And it was late in the day, and it was getting dark. It was fall, so it got dark early. And she was looking on her phone, and she says, Doreen, I was holding it here, and I was just getting the GPS right because I was a little confused up by the streets. And so he said to me, use my phone. And I said, oh. She says, no, that's okay. This is good. I'm good. I'm on track.
Right.
And he says, no, use my phone. And she says, I'm fine. He took his phone and he threw it at her and he hit her at the side of the head. And they were going for a romantic overnight.
Right.
This was at 7 p.m. So I said, so what, I wanted to scream, hope you you pulled over and you got out or something. Not really, but I just mean
right.
you got
away
from him.
She was the driver?
She wasn't. She was the passenger.
Oh, she was the passenger.
So, I'm sorry, right. So thank you. So he was driving. Mm-hmm. So she said, I just was shocked. And I just looked at him and he said, you should have used my phone. He had she said, Doreen, I don't even know who he was. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's pretty, I didn't, I was kind of devastated because I've gotten to really like her. So it was like almost a friend, be hurting a friend because this woman I've been coaching for a little while. And I said, what'd you do? She said, we went to the Airbnb, we checked in, and I just sat on the couch. And he asked me what was wrong. And I said, wow. After that, he asked you what was wrong.
Right.
So I said, so how was your evening? And she said, I stayed on the couch. He eventually went to bed. And I stayed on the couch and just slept on the couch. And I says, okay, so what happened in the morning? And he says, well, if you're going to be like this, let's just go. And so he said, he never apologized. He said, do you want to get some breakfast? And she said, I hadn't had dinner. So I fell into having breakfast with him. And then the day he started getting nicer and he wanted to do this and buy me this. And I figured he just was probably maybe having a bad day. And she says, is he having a bad day or is this who he is? It's like, oh, yeah. But this had been in a story after another story after another story.
Right.
But because she was so alone for so long, she was lonesome.
And he was gaslighting her.
And she's so empathetic. And I got to know her. She is an HSP. I mean, these lights in the studio are really bothering me. She would be in my studio and we'd be like lowering the shades. She definitely has sensitivity to light, sound, emotions.
Right.
So, and her empathy is very, very deep. She told me about her children and how they're not so kind to her sometimes, and she's very kind. So she's got this empathetic streak, this trait.
Right.
And she just kept making excuses for him. Do you see this? Do you see this kind of thing in your practice?
Yes, a lot. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when I work with someone, I was working with a woman and her husband was very much a narcissist. And she knew that, but she would still make excuses for him. And, she even brought him into a session one day and he was very angry with me because I say it like it is.
Right. So. I know. I love that about you. Anyone that wants a therapist that says it like it is, it's Wendy Weinberg. Okay. You can reach me after the show at Doreen@blossomhealingstudio.com. So she knew, but she just hung in there.
She did.
Now, as a therapist, can you say to somebody, or no, because I can as a coach, right. I can say 4 words. When people tell me they're in the relationship, they're very upset. I said, I'm going to give you 4 words. Get up and run.
Mm-hmm. I can.
Can you?
I can, and I do.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
And with me, they can say, well, they know I'm not, that they can treat me like I don't really have that credibility or that maybe knowledge, even though they want to still work with me and talk with me and they respect me. But with you, you've got that credibility. So when you tell them, because they don't make any changes with me, do they make any changes with you?
Well, it's interesting. Not usually right away.
Right. Okay.
And the way I also say it is when someone shows you who they truly are, believe it. Because it's not an act, it's who they are. And a lot of the time they'll pull the blinders up to hide and disguise who they are. But when those blinders come down and you get a peek at who they are and you see it. And I also point out the behaviors, very controlling behaviors, very insecure, very jealous, tries to come between their partner and whoever is in their life. Whether it's kids, parents, friends.
That's what he was trying to do, keep her from her kids.
Because that's how he has the most control. So I point out the different characteristics. So they can't say, oh, you just don't like this guy or this woman or whoever. And you have to be really concrete.
Yes, you do.
And so sometimes they don't do anything at first and sometimes people stay. And I've worked with one person for many, many years. And, she had a boyfriend that was a narcissist and abusive, and eventually she left. It took a while, but she left.
It's so interesting. When they finally leave, these people, they try a little bit. They try to get them a little bit. They try. They're texting, blah, blah, blah. But if you close that door and you tighten it and lock it, they do find somebody else.
Oh, they do. They always have someone in their back pocket.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's not
because they don't want to. They need to have someone constantly stroking their ego.
Exactly. I love what you said. You said when people show you who they are, trust that.
Exactly.
And I'd love to just add to that. When people tell you who they are, believe them.
True.
Right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want to be with me. I'm screwed up.
Right.
Well, you know what? There's really nothing more to that.
Right.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we think we can fix these people, or people think they can fix them, especially these highly sensitive, empathetic people. They think they can help them.
It's true. And I think, to be a therapist too, you have to want to help people. So you have that empathy,
Yes.
but learning to trust your gut and realize, okay, whether it's just even with a friendship. I've had friends too in the past, who have kind of taken advantage or family members. And you learn to create strong boundaries because it's self-preservation.
I love that. And, as I do a lot of work with people, highly sensitive people setting boundaries, when people feel guilty about them, I just want to put this out there that when people feel guilty, use the letter G. When people feel guilty, that means you're growing.
Right.
You're growing away from people by setting those boundaries. But you made such a great point, and as an HSP, intuition is really strong. Mm-hmm. But the challenge is, for some reason, people don't listen to it when their heart is involved.
True. You know what I always tell people, and what I do for myself even, is what would you tell your best friend? Because you're usually very honest, and you say it like it is. Mm-hmm. So I say, what would I tell a friend, a client, and then take my own advice?
Exactly, and listen to it, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
You got to kind of take yourself out of who you are and what you would say to someone else.
But again, that's brilliant and that's logical. Mm-hmm. But as this woman, let's call her Jane, her struggling with her heart was in it because she was getting the love. She was getting the physical love. She was getting the emotional love. She was getting the intellectual. He was discussing his work with her. She was so engaged. Mm-hmm. And yet she'd said to me, something isn't right. And I'd say, trust that.
Exactly.
Trust that. What isn't right?
Write it out. I'm a big believer in writing things out, too.
Yes.
Write a pros and cons list.
Yeah, and look at it and share it with the best friend.
And say, what would you say to someone else when you look at all these cons? Or even if there's just one or two, but they're strong. Like when they have a temper. Because I think people really show who they are when they're not happy. If they're not feeling like they're being stroked, their ego.
So now let's switch over to the workplace.
Okay.
Right? So I'm sure you see people coming in about my boss, right? My boss is a narcissist, or my coworker is. That's challenging too, because that will make people potentially leave the workplace.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It will.
Because they really can't, it's almost as though they don't understand what a narcissist is and then how to manage it.
Exactly.
You know, because you can feed into them.
I think it also depends on who it is. If it's your boss or a supervisor, that's kind of like letting you know this is what your road ahead is. And do you want to work with this every day? Because it does chip away at you.
It does chip away. And you can't change them. So you're accepting.
Exactly. All you can change is how you respond. So when someone has an action you don't like, there's nothing you can do to change it. All you can change is how you respond to it. Do you walk away? Do you fight back? And I don't recommend that, like getting into a head-to-head fight with somebody, and especially if they're your supervisor. So you have to learn, okay, this is who I am, and this, and looking for the right job and the right fit. And I think that's so important. It has to be the right fit, whether it's a partner, a friend, a job, a supervisor, even as a therapist. And I'll tell my, potential clients, it has to be a good fit.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
And you know it.
You do. You have it in your gut. You how you are, how you speak, what you think.
Yeah.
It comes across, and you have to go with your gut.
Absolutely. So I had this other client. His name is Jim. Of course, I changed his name.
Right.
Jim came in, and he has been dealing with his narcissist boss. His name was Kyle for just about a year and a half. It was a new job. He loved it. Good money. He was happy with his work.
Right.
But Kyle would work really hard to just always kind of do little digs to make him feel bad about himself, and he made him feel very vulnerable, Jim. Mm-hmm. So he got to really learn that his boss was a narcissist, and he said to me, I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to work with this person. So we just talked a lot about it, but he did see a therapist to try to help himself because he was starting to feel so bad about himself.
Right.
And then he did a little research, and he realized, and he told me, and right in my coaching session, he said to me, Doreen, I just praise him, I get the work done, and I get right back to him. So he doesn't really have much to kind of get at me for. So we don't have a lot of communication, which is fine with me, and that's how I like it. That way I'm not pulled into his web of baloney.
Right.
So this was going on for a while, and he was really fatigued. He was fatigued in this role, and he was starting to feel like he didn't even want to talk to Kyle anymore because he was feeling every time he did it was like an energy vampire. It was just too much, right?
Right.
Then one day, and this was during COVID, one day he jokingly during a meeting said, and he said to me, this is the truth, Doreen, I'm telling you real truth. I said to my team, do we need Kyle to come today? Or are we good?
Right.
There was one team member that was brand new that was hired by Kyle.
Okay.
Jim wasn't able to because he was on holiday. They hired this woman. She took what Jim said so personally about Kyle, and she had this relationship with Kyle because Kyle hired her.
Right.
That afternoon when Kyle called her and says, how was your third day at work? She said, good, but I guess Jim said we didn't really need you this week. He goes, what do you mean? He said he didn't need me. And the way it was interpreted, his ego was so damaged by that. When this was a very innocent, do we need him today? We're all set. We have enough wipes, enough gloves, that kind of thing, because he was running a senior living community. And he just didn't need his boss to come and even bring the virus in. Like he said, we don't need him today, right? And so, by her saying that, that was on a Wednesday. On Friday morning, Kyle was the boss. Jim was getting ready for work, and he got a call from Kyle and said, don't leave the house. We'll be calling you shortly. And so Jim said, what happened? Are there more people that got the virus, or what's going on? He said, we'll call you shortly. They called him a half hour later with HR on the phone, and they let him go.
Oh, wow.
And it's so interesting. Here he is, Jim, fighting for his life to work with this narcissist. But as soon as the narcissist got one hint that he wasn't the king.
Right.
And he was. There was none of that, but it was his interpretation from...
that's the narcissistic wound.
Is that the wound?
He felt insulted by Jim.
And it was horrible. He had a kid, his wife, and it was insurance. And he was devastated because he was so angry at himself for putting up with it for a year and a half.
Right.
But in the
he
same
did him a favor.
Yeah, but in the same hand... he was so blindsided because he had worked so hard to try to make this work.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, it's and I think for highly sensitive people, it's a real challenge, and I think encouraging them to listen to your gut, set boundaries, talk to a friend.
Right.
What other strategies would you suggest people do?
I'm a big believer in journaling, writing. Because I think it's in black and white, like physically writing it out, not just typing it on a computer.
Give an example, like if you were going to give advice, like put it on at the end of the day or when something comes to you, or what kind of...
Well, I think also people sometimes have a hard time expressing themselves, especially, when they're dealing with a narcissist, because the narcissist will get angry right away and start attacking them. So what my suggestion is, write a letter and then give them the letter and walk away, let them read it, have their emotion, and then come back when they're calm and say, were you able to, in black and white, because when you're talking to a narcissist sometimes, they're not really hearing what you're saying, they're just feeling insulted and not stroked. And so if you have it in a letter and it's in black and white and they can reread it.
You're literally handing it to them so they can open it and read it? Wow.
And then I would walk away though.
Yep.
So.
And do you walk away and leave, or do you walk away for that to return to a conversation?
I think it depends on the person and the level of anger that they can have.
True. Right.
I think if it's something that if you're a little afraid of the person, get out of the house, get out of the office, whatever it is.
Right. Because there is that extreme, isn't it?
There always is.
Yeah.
Because it's a spectrum. It affects people differently.
Right. And it's kind of like you can't trust, right? You don't know, it's unpredictable.
And that's why I think it's so important for you to be, honest with yourself and express yourself. And if you're afraid to do it or you lose your words because you're anxious in the moment, that's why I would suggest writing a letter.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I never thought of that. That's a great technique. Now,
Thank you.
Do you also think that a male relationship with a female is even more detrimental because of the way women are wired, kind of taught to be the good person, be kind,
I think
and
so,
all that?
and be the caretaker. Yes, I think. Yeah, I think you'll see more male. Women are certainly capable of being narcissists as well.
Yep, definitely.
Yes, but I think it's different with women, and there's narcissist personality disorder. There's also borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and they can all overlap and interweave. They can have similar characteristics.
Can you just kind of give us an idea of the borderline personality disorder? We have time. Yeah, we have time.
Sure.
No, we're great.
So it's very hard to decipher, between the two.
Yeah, a lot of gray.
There is a lot of gray, I think.
Anything you can share that's a little helpful.
Right. So what's interesting with a borderline person who has borderline personality disorder, they can love you till they hate you. That's something I learned. So what's different with narcissists is if you're not stroking them, they'll then come back and try and kind of love bomb you, so to speak, to pull you back in. A borderline doesn't do that. They can think you're wonderful for a while, and then once they feel like you've crossed them, they're done with you.
Is that the switch? Is when you cross them? They don't get tired of you. You do something that makes them say, I can't control this person anymore, so I'm done?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Or I didn't see this person for who they truly were.
And what about, I think you said
histrionic.
Histrionic. So talk about that.
So histrionics, everything affects them. So they can be angry, so angry one minute and with something, or they can be really, it's sort of like a lesser version of borderline personality disorder. And they can be very emotional and need a lot of attention. And so it's like I said, they have overlapping,
And what turns the switch on them, or do they?
I think it depends on the person and the situation.
That's true. It's all such a spectrum, isn't it?
It is, and I think a lot of times too, if they're not getting what they need, then they're suicidal.
Wow. So
that's a way of manipulating someone as well.
Yes, absolutely. The emotional vampire.
Yes.
So what would you say to a person, whatever you're comfortable sharing, that is in a relationship, whether it's a boss, whether it's a boyfriend, whether it's a sister,
right,
whether it's a friend that you've known maybe it's a new friend, maybe it's an old friend, whatever. But the relationship is keeping them up at night almost. And when they're in the shower, they're almost talking to them what they want to say, but they can't say it. It's really under their skin.
Right.
And it's not lifting them up like we want to do with friends.
Right.
It's the opposite. It's literally pulling them down to a place where they can't even think straight. They're really distracted by the discomfort of this relationship.
Right.
But for some reason they stay in it. What do you say to somebody like that?
Well, I think it's difficult. If it's a partner, I would say, maybe this is what you need to really look at. If it's a sibling or a parent or something like that, I think you need to have really strong boundaries. And just because they're in your life doesn't mean you have to be close to them. I think that's the hardest thing to learn. Yeah. Especially for an empath or someone who's highly sensitive, is learning to have boundaries and not feeling guilty for having boundaries.
Right.
Because it's self-preservation, and you have to. My husband told me this analogy of when you're in an airplane and you have to put a mask on, the oxygen mask. You have to put it on yourself first. That's the rules before you can help someone else. And I use that analogy all the time. When I tell someone, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Take care of you first before you can worry about someone else. Yeah.
It's just such great common sense, but such a great visual too, because you can't help them if you're weakened, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So interesting. Thank you so much. This has
you're
been
welcome.
Great. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. Same here.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too, as a parent, when you have kids, they watch you and they watch how you handle relationships. And I think it's also very important to be honest, have communication with your kids and say, this is not acceptable.
Parent, right? Parent, it's okay. They're not. It makes me crazy when parents say, I hate to take the money from him, but he won't take out the trash. I said, what? So yeah, be a parent. That's
Right.
your job. Their job is to be a student at the time.
Right.
You be a parent, you know.
And people are always watching how you handle things. So be a good teacher.
Yeah, love that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Wendy. That's awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for watching The Sensitive Warrior. Wendy Weinberg is someone that would be fantastic to talk to if you want a therapist who's actually going to speak with you and tell you like it is. With all her, how many years of experience?
Like 30.
30. Okay, so you can reach her through me at Doreen at yourhspcoach.com. I will connect you up. She works in Situate, Massachusetts.
Correct.
Do you do virtual work as well?
I do.
And virtual work, so.
And I bring my dog.
And she brings a dog. So you know there's going to be a good vibe going on there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of The Sensitive Warrior. And if I can ever help you understand your sensitivity, please reach out to me as well, Doreen at yourhspcoach.com. And until then, remember, feeling everything is your superpower. Thank you so much. See you next time.